Seasons change.
Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Betsy.
And we host a podcast called Going on 30.
Each month, Greg and I discuss movies that were nominated or should have been nominated for Best Picture 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely a risky business, but we'd be losing it if we didn't discuss the legend of Oscar caliber movies.
That's a little dramatic, but sure. We give our takes on one movie each month, debate its lasting legacy, and talk about its place in cinema history.
You know, Betsy, in these days of thunder, when far and away a few good men are going through life with their eyes wide shut to the firm hold that The Color of Money has over the film industry, it's just a night and day difference between the beautiful magnolia of the top guns of the business and the oblivion of the edge of tomorrow of American-made franchise.
Okay, all right. I think I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm having a cocktail while I give you my Minority Report on the War of the Worlds.
Stop it. You are listing just Tom Cruise movies. I'm done.
That is just Mission Impossible. Ghost Protocol.
Okay, so listen to Going on 30 whenever you get the Poppy College feed.
Jerry Maguire, the Mummy. Jack Reacher, the Vanilla Sky Rain Man.
God, you have a deep, deep problem, my friend.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Knight. I am the host of the Popping Collars Music Diary. Welcome to it. With me is not my co-host, Ricardo Avila. He is still in France, enjoying his time on the Riviera, sipping. What do they sip on the Riviera? Mai Tais?
I wish I was on the Riviera.
So instead, I've called in a special guest. It's the Reverend Kyle Goodman is with us today, you guys. Welcome,
and
Kyle.
Super excited to be.
Kyle, a long time, goes back with us all the way to the early days of Popping Collars. As a matter of fact, the reason that I have you on, Kyle, is because I have recently been re-editing a Take Two episode from our Doctor Who conversation,
Ooh.
which was episode 5 of this here podcast.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to be updating the pod. Would you like to tell our audience any Doctor Who updated takes that you would like to give right now in 2 minutes?
I really, really wanted to like the Jodie Whittaker Doctor, and it wasn't good. And I have liked the Kuti Gatwa Doctor a whole lot more. I think the episodes have been, on the whole, a whole lot better. But I feel like he just kind of used Doctor Who, and I say anything more about that, and we're into spoiler territory. And the season finale just aired this past Saturday, and so I'm gonna let that sit and lie. I don't think things have been nearly as good as that golden era of Matt Smith, and Matt Smith is still the best Doctor. That's 2 minutes worth, right?
Wow. What a take. I'm going to cut that audio and put it into the Doctor Who Take Two. Kyle, welcome. This is our PC Music Diary. Normally, it would be me and Ricardo talking about songs that are based on a theme, a genre, an album, or an artist. But like I said, Ricardo is not here. And so I'm so glad that you're here because this is a topic that Ricardo would have hated, not because it's a theme that he wouldn't want to do. What he would have hated about it is that he could not, I guarantee this now, limit himself to 5 songs with the theme that we're talking about.
Wait, was I supposed to limit myself to 5 songs? I did.
I love Ricardo. He's such a wealth of knowledge on this podcast, but also like his love of music precludes him from being able to edit his lists sometimes. And this is a list that you're going to have to edit because this is us telling our spiritual autobiographies in music.
Hmm.
Okay, so here's how this is going to work. You and I, both adult white men in our 40s, so clearly we need to talk about this on a podcast, like all other
Hmm.
white men in their
Hmm.
40s, are going to look back over our lives and the 5 decades that we've predominantly lived in, the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, the teens, and the 20s. And we're going to pick a song from one song from each of those decades to describe our personal spiritual growth as we've gone through life. Does that make sense?
It made sense to me when I asked you about it again.
What scares you the most about this process? Is it trying to limit yourself on songs from the 80s and 90s, or is it trying to think of a song from the 20s?
I actually didn't struggle that much with the 20s, probably because of the way I took it. So I'm going to have to go with the limiting myself. I mean, the issue, as you know, as I'm sure your listeners are thinking about, is that if you are our age and of our oeuvre. The reality is the decade that we came up. It's all the songs that's still the decade where where my most beloved songs are coming from, and so like I want them all to be from that, and I even kind of cheated a little bit in some interesting ways about that, but that's all right. I think I have followed the letter of the law, if not the spirit of it. So
Well, now here comes the big question. Let's start this journey down the road. Do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to?
I want you to.
Okay.
Maybe we could like kind of ping pong back and forth. Like you start.
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah, so I'll start with my 80s and then you do your 80s. Yeah, we'll go back and forth. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
So 80s. 80s Greg is a child. This is
Yes.
before before I'm in my teens. But I'm well enough aware of like what's going on around me to be able to take in popular culture, especially 80s popular culture. And so my pick for my 80s spiritual biography song is At This Moment by Billy Vera and the Beaters.
What did you think I would do at this moment when you're standing before me with tears in your eyes trying to tell me?
Okay.
Now, where would you know this song from? If you were an 80s baby, you would know this song as the song from Family Ties when
Mm-hmm.
Alex gets together with Ellen. Is that her name? Finally, right? They have this sort of unrequited love, and they finally sort of fall in love together at a dance, but they can't be together, right? And so the sort of haunting nature of the song is that it's a song about love that is not going to happen, right? There's this wonderful sort of Family Ties scene where the two of them are dancing, but you know that like this isn't going to last. They're ultimately not going to be together, and the reason that I think about this is the 80s. This may be starting off too hard here, Kyle, but I think it's important. You and I both know this because we are children of divorce, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, we have a very unique story because our children of divorce stories sort of overlap a little
It's the
bit.
same story.
But here's the thing. There's something about being a child of divorce, I think, that allows you to look at the world around you and see it as impermanent. And that's
Mhm.
not to say that, it's somebody did something wrong and has somehow damaged us in some way. I don't think that that's it. But being able to think back on something like a family unit institution as a
Mhm.
child and know that even that can change at some point,
Yeah.
there's something that changes your worldview and your outlook from there. And as well as anyone, being a religious studies major along with me, impermanence is really sort of the goal of a lot of ancient religions. It's this idea of understanding that you can't build a temple at the transfiguration, right? You have to let that shit go sometimes, right? And so I find it valuable, if not heartbreaking and hard, to have to go through experiences like that at a young age, but it also allows you to see the world in a way that I think is more mature and really gets you into a more mature spiritual mindset for later on in life. And so at this moment is a great reminder of that, about this idea that love exists, but sometimes it goes away, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't mean that the world is ending. You just keep moving down the road. So At This Moment by Billy Vera and the Beaters is mine.
Nice. And man, I wondered in this assignment how obscure you could go, and you just took it there, right? Like, I'm trying to think of any lyric to that song, so that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I of course will be pulling out the Google when we're done today. So I kind of went the opposite direction with my pick, and because it was the '80s, and because, as you put it, I was a child, and well, here's the real truth. I appreciated the sentiment about divorce, and I own that. But I wanted, since we're talking about spiritual autobiographies in music, I want to own something right out of the gate, and I hope you'll forgive the level of sentimentality here. But as a kid, listening to music was not a huge part of my earliest memories. We listened to music in the car, and my mom listened to what I'm going to call station wagon pop, which is in the '80s like the easy listening, pop station. And so they're
Sure.
playing like Uptown Girl
The
and
Bangles.
Karma Chameleon, right? And
Yeah.
there's some really Su Studio, right? I mean,
Wilson
that's
Phillips.
well, you know what? Gosh, I did a thing with Wilson Phillips the other day. We ended a service just playing that in the background just for fun, But there's some great songs from that whole genre too. Like Total Eclipse of the Heart and
Mhm.
Michael Jackson stuff like Billie Jean. Time After Time, Cyndi Lauper. But that really wasn't my that really wasn't my thing. And I don't think I really loved music. And so here's the sentimentality. It was you who taught me to love music.
Oh,
And yeah, I'm hitting hard with the autobiography and the sentimentality, right? Like, when I got into listening to music, was talking about it, thinking about it, really kind of looking at it with you. So, like, I love the idea of music in an autobiography conversation with you, because, like, you're the start of my music autobiography. So I
all right.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the song I'm going with, and it's kind of my half cheat song, and it's the most obvious pick that you can have, I think, for this particular topic. I'm going U2 because I think they were doing what I was interested in the '90s in the '80s, and I'm going with the most obvious spiritual autobiographical song I think you can get, in my view, which is I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For.
Hmm.
I have climbed highest mountain. I have run through the fields only to be with you. Only to be with you.
That's not holding just for the '80s. This is the cheat. It's really holding the whole story, right? And I like what you were talking about with the idea of impermanence. I also think there's just this sense of, we're all spiritual nomads, and we're looking for whatever that is that kind of grounds us and roots us. And I've spent my whole life um, not really being fully content in where I sit and where I stand, not being content in my beliefs, not being content in my relationships, not being content with just this experience. I'm kind of built to look for the thing that's next. And thank you for the conversation about divorce because I think that's probably where a lot of that gets started for me.
Hmm.
And it's helpful to me to think about it that way because that's an incident that really kind of launches me as someone who quests after that
Hmm.
and who is constantly looking for, what the finish line is and is never really content with it, which I think is not a bad place to be as a pastor and leader of a congregation. So that's where I'm landing for this one. And again, it's just not only holding the 80s but the whole thing. And it is one of my favorite songs, even though it's obvious. So
I'm going to cross over with some of the content from our other podcasts on this here podcasting juggernaut that is the Popping Collars Empire. But,
mhm.
Ryan Parker and I have been talking. We've been doing this pilgrimage project. We've been talking about sort of the exponential growth of pilgrims around the world and why that is. And we're sort of doing this research project to figure this out. I love your pick because I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Is almost like a pilgrim anthem, right?
Mhm.
It's this idea of searching. I know that there's something that I feel like I'm missing, but I don't know what it is, and I'm going to go out into the world and see if I can find it, right?
Yeah.
But there's something at tension with that sort of spiritual quest and the vocation, I think, of a pastor whose role is really that of shepherd, right? Is
Mhm.
guiding a flock and making sure that everyone is sort of contained in
Yeah.
in the pen, right? And
Yeah.
I wonder, like, as a pastor yourself, we didn't do a full introduction, but I figured that was okay because it was kind of gonna come out as we did our conversation
Right.
here. But like, as a pastor at Alamance Presbyterian Church, how do you hold those things together? Like this idea that you have a vocation to sort of be a shepherd, but you know that your people may need to go search as pilgrims.
My first answer to that is some real honesty about it, and some vulnerability about that. I don't purport to be the leader that has all of the answers myself. And I would rather be a conversation partner and, to mix all the metaphors, a fellow journeyer on that pilgrimage, right? Like I think what I bring to the table in that leadership it is some ability to empathize, some ability to help people wrestle with the things that they're wrestling with because I'm wrestling with them too, and to not be afraid to do that. I think that's difficult for a lot of pastors. We're naturally disposed to put up some of those walls, and we're taught to do that with all this conversation about differentiation, right, and boundaries, and all of that's super important.
Mhm.
But I think sometimes boundaries ends up being a wall to vulnerability and humility, and I think that's really important to figure out how to show. And that song I think is about being vulnerable. For someone who Bono's claiming faith, he's
Mhm.
claiming that he's experiencing God and religion and relationship and life in all of its fullness, but to be vulnerable enough to say, is this really it? This can't be it. There's got to be more. And I think people all feel that. And
Mhm.
to be willing to say, we're still looking, even though we've got to love what we have. I'm really struck by, kind of starting the conversation in divorce and starting the conversation with a journey of longing for meaning and belonging, because that's what that ends up being about.
Yeah.
And never really got it locked down. And that's actually not only an okay place to be, but it may be the right place to be. It's the place I do ministry from.
I think that's right. And that serves as like a perfect segue to my 90s song. So why don't we go into the 90s?
Okay.
This has got to be when we're talking about music, this has got to be the hardest decade for you and I, right?
Big time.
Because so 90s for us is like teens, college, era. So this is like when your taste in music actually matters.
Mhm.
Like none of these other decades really like matter, but this is the one that really matters. And one what I sort of associate with 90s, the 90s time period, and you're right, it's this idea of searching for stability, searching for, whatever that is, that groundedness is. And part of that groundedness is in found family. I think that that's a part of our story,
Yeah.
like jointly but also separately, is this idea that you find yourself in groups that are so intensely vulnerable and connected that it is like a family unit, and in some ways transcends a family unit, right? Because of the level of connection that you have. So my 90s pick is from Oasis, and it's Live Forever.
Maybe I just wanna fly, wanna live but don't wanna die. Maybe I just wanna breathe. Maybe I just don't believe. Maybe you're the same as me. We see things I'll never see. You and I gonna live forever. I said maybe.
Why would I pick Live Forever? So probably the 90s was the time that I embraced the idea of eternal life more than at any other time of my life. I think if you ask me now what that is, I would be suspicious, very confused. I don't know that I could articulate what anything about eternal life would look like either on this world or in any other world, right? It's just like it is so amorphous as to be not even worth talking about because it's just too great of a mystery, right? But in the mid 90s, I could drive down my car and I could scream along with Liam and Noel Gallagher that you and I are going to live forever and fully believe that.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah, buddy.
and the other thing that I love about Live Forever is that there's an audaciousness to this song. There is such audacity in this song where what is it he says in the chorus where it's like maybe I just want to breathe. Maybe I just don't believe. Maybe
Hmm.
you're the same as me. We see things we'll never see. You and I, we're going to live forever. There's just it's so abrasive and so audacious that it's like, you have no business singing these words, but my God, I'm so glad you're singing these words because I want to feel that too. And so, yeah, so I think that this was the decade where I feel like I had as much figured out about life as at any other point. And now I look back on it and realize that I had no idea what I was talking about. But just the ability to scream at the top of my lungs that I'm going to live forever, totally 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's a really good one too. And I worried there you were going to say Wonderwall when you said Oasis. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's sort of I mean, what's the first thing we do when we really come into faith? It's we figure out the dogma, right?
mhm.
Not the theology. Theology is kind of a few more steps removed, right? What are we really buying into? For what it's worth, I think this is not what continues to matter to me, but we were kind of sold the same old narrative, right? Like find Jesus, give him your heart, check your box,
Yeah,
get
yeah. Well, yeah,
in,
the status is pretty clear, right? God's
right?
up in heaven, you're down here, do good, you get there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all
right.
it's all sort of mapped out.
On the straight and narrow way, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Any complication be damned. Well, and it comes, right? It comes when you start doing the theology stuff. If you're doing it
Hmm.
in earnest, if you're being honest with it, it doesn't come first. It can't. You've got to set all of the parts out on the table
Hmm.
before you start seeing how they fit together and picking them up and holding them and turning them around and saying this really doesn't plug in with that.
Hmm.
I think it's the honest and right place to be.
And
Um,
the different periods of your life occur in different ways, right?
right.
Like
Well, my pick. I mean, full disclosure, I actually didn't have a very difficult time picking this.
Mm.
Uh, for me, it was more about the utter disappointment in all of the things that I knew I wasn't gonna get to talk about because I sort of had to pick this one. But it was the first thing literally the first thing I thought of when I thought about the '90s, and there's really no reason not to go with it. And it's Counting Crows Round Here.
Round here, we never sense a better. Man, nobody makes us wait. Round here, we stay up very, 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 very late. I can't.
And there's some just very real practical association with the song. I mean, I can remember not one time, but an enormous, sample of times where I'm just sitting around not listening to the song, but singing the song. And there's a lot of words in those songs that Counting Crows do, but singing the song to myself. I remember walking from the high school to the library. What a nerd! And singing that song, to myself or with the people who I was subjecting it to, while we were walking together. And there's just a sense that that was an anthem. And, it really doesn't fit with a lot of the other music. I mean, it's a lot more poppy than all of the alternative rock, grunge stuff that I listen to. But
Yeah.
I the first CD I ever had, I will confess, was Criss Cross's self-titled album, and the second one was the wrong Nirvana album, not Nevermind. Like it was in utero. Like I don't know how that happened, but like I couldn't even tell you what the charting
Well,
track is on
Utero's
that.
great though. I love
Okay,
it.
fair. But what was the track on there that charted? I don't even know.
Heart-shaped box.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But like that Counting Crows, August and everything after, I just wore out. And I could tell you every track, in order on that, even today. And I haven't listened to the album in a decade. But this song, I think, I don't know if he knows this because I think he thinks it's about something different, but Adam Duritz wrote this song about middle school and high school and the experience of sort of getting out from under what is put upon you and discovering your own freedom to be. With lyrics as simple and profound as around here no one sends us to bed early. We stay up late. And like this sense that, but really the line that. This version of the hook, around here we're carving out our names. Around here we all look the same, and we're trying to figure out who we are and our identity, and carve out something other than just being the cookie cutter poser that at that time we were all so opposed to, and we all just were.
Hmm.
But trying to figure that out in a life of faith, trying to be different and also a part of all of those crowds in high school. We wanted to stand out and be different, and because of that, be accepted. I do. I think the song is profound, and I also think it's a lot more middle school and high school than. I think it just perfectly encapsulated that. And the song came out in '93, and I was a freshman in high
Yeah.
school in '93. And so it's really about my freshman year of high school. There are pieces of this song that are about trying to understand something deeper. Maria's is taking her clothes off, trying to understand, Jesus. She's close to understanding Jesus, right? And she's trying to figure it out, and she's a nervous wreck. And God, that feels like me as a ninth grade boy. So. Yeah.
You know what? I had the great opportunity. So, as you know, Counting Crows is my favorite band of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Love Counting Crows. There's a YouTube channel hosted by a music producer named Rick Beato. But he had an interview with Adam Duritz recently,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of months ago, and it's about an hour-long interview. And so, of course, I like inhaled the entire thing. Round Here was a song that Adam already had. It was from his previous bands, it was kind of a hit song with his previous band, the Himalayans, before he
Mm.
started Counting Crows. And so when they started producing August and Everything After as an album, that was the one song that they came in and they were like, we got one, you know? And so it's like, that was the song that was already sort of done. And you can tell when you listen to that album, you know, Counting Crows is a guitar band that goes in a very kind of different way from the Himalayans, which is more sort of a psychedelic kind of vibe, I think. But you can tell that Round Here is sort of this fully formed thing, kind of already made in Adam's head. And he knows it so well that he can tell the song differently, almost like a Dylan song, right? Where
Hmm.
Bob Dylan knows his songs so well that he never has to sing them the same way
Twice.
each
Yeah.
time, right? They're like these characters in his mind that can evolve and grow and change and adapt over time. And that's what I love about Round Here is that it can live in your middle school space and it
Hmm.
can grow with you as you go through
Absolutely.
life and
Yeah.
adapt to whatever it is. Yeah, later on. So,
Yeah, I think some music just kind of lives in its decade too. And you're right.
mhm.
This is not a band that is stuck in its own decade. Actually, a lot of 80s music seems to have not been stuck in its own decade in a way that I think other music is too. But
Yeah. You know,
but
one of the things that came out of that interview that I thought was really interesting was that Adam said, you know, I never thought of ourselves as a popular band, right? Like I think he fully believed that like Mr. Jones would be the only hit they ever had.
Mhm.
And I think he was okay with that being the case. But one of the laments that he has in the interview that I thought was really interesting was that he was like, you know, we put out these albums, and what I was hoping was that we would go on the road and people would love our B-sides. People would
Mhm.
be like, oh, I remember like Black and Blue from Hard Candy, or I remember like Mrs. Potter's Lullaby from, you know, or something like that, and like
All
sing
20
along with
minutes of
those.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, but instead he's like, I get out there and it's like, we'll play like some of these songs and there's like limited reaction, and then it's like Long December or Mr. Jones, and it's like, I think it bums him out that like
Mhm.
he doesn't have like a Fish audience, you know, or like a
Yeah.
Grateful Dead audience. And I think that that's what he's always sort of craved is to have people who love the band so much that every song matters, but not like in a super way, just in like a lived kind of like, oh man, this is like the soundtrack of my life kind of way.
Well,
Yeah.
now you're talking about the pastoral vocation again. I mean, I mean, seriously, people love the stuff they want to love. They're looking for the greatest hits all the time, and I think most of us are more interested in showing some of the B-side material.
Hmm.
They're like, okay, great, you love the Beatitudes, so do I. But let's look at another parable or two. Like, oh, you think the story of David and Goliath is interesting? Well, let's read all 50 odd chapters of war and mayhem together. And people aren't so down for that, right? But uh,
Brother, I wish people were into the Beatitudes. Like, you
okay.
know, unfortunately, we live in a world that it's like, no, I got to put the Ten Commandments up in front of a courthouse because I can't remember what they are or something. I don't even know what it is that people are doing. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Maybe we should lead that push. Let's replace the Ten Commandments with the Beatitudes and put
Could
them.
you imagine? Blessed are the merciful as you're walking into a
I,
courthouse.
yes, I can imagine it, actually. I think it changes everything. I think this is probably the most important idea that will come up in our conversation.
Blessed are the peacemakers as you're walking into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Okay. The 2000s, and here we've come to a road diverged in a wood here. For me, I'm gonna do something that Ricardo does a lot. I love you, Ricardo. I miss you. I can't wait until you're back. I always feel like I'm disparaging Ricardo when he's not here, so just want to drop in things. I'm gonna do something that Ricardo does a lot, which is I'm gonna smuggle a pick in here because there's a song that I really wish could be my pick, and that's all these things that I've done by the Killers. I
Mhm.
wish that that was my pick for the 2000s because The Killers is one of those bands that I love everything about. I love the music especially, but I also love sort of the makeup of the band. You know, this idea that these Mormons from Las Vegas, are like out here making this crazy rock and roll music. It's just there's so many contradictions to them that like I just find them fascinating. And all these things that I've done, it's not only is it a great Guitar Hero song if you play along on Guitar Hero 4, I think it is, but it's also got that fabulous refrain that comes at the end of the song, which is "I got soul, but I'm not a soldier," right?
Hmm.
And he just repeats it over and over again until it becomes something of a mantra and something of like a almost like a prayer in the way that it sort of like goes through that song. I wish I could pick all these things that I've done. But if you know me and if you know my story, you know that I am prone to self-sabotage in many areas of my life, and my vocational pursuit is one of those. The 2000s was where I really embraced the "fuck it, I'll do it my way" attitude that did not get me hired. or advance me in any way on the career path that I thought I was called to. It turns out that all of those things that we say that we embrace about Gen X, the nonconformity, the not selling out attitude, it turns out that those are all the things that the institutional church is looking for in priests.
Yeah.
Unless you have the right bishop, and I never had the right bishop in the Episcopal Church that could embrace my unique outlook on ministry and life. And so because I'm prone to self-sabotage, I have to saddle myself with the cross that I have to bear here in the 2000s, Kyle.
Hmm.
And that means that I have to embrace my song from that era as "Break Stuff" by Limp Bizkit.
And if my day keeps going this way, I just might break your breaking face tonight. Give me something to break. Give me something to break. Just give me something to break. I got your face. I hope you know
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everyone out there that a Limp Bizkit song is on this playlist. I'm sorry that I'm having to force you to listen to Fred Durst right now. I'm sorry that you're picturing his backwards red New York Yankees cap right now on his head. I'm sorry about all of it, but unfortunately, this is the path that I chose. Is I chose the break stuff path.
Let me jump in here and just say that my anti-aughts, boy, I was a child of the 90s bias basically says that all 2000s music is vapid. So, and I know that's not true, and I'm going to contradict myself in a minute, but I just want to put that on the table as I don't feel like you actually have to apologize for any of your aughts picks. Fair?
I will say this, and this is the thing. So yes, I opted for the break stuff route, which is that I was given assignments from my standing committee for my commission on ministry when I was pursuing ordained ministry. And what did I do? I said no, and I, took a giant dump on everything that they told me to do. And as a result, they were like, "Well, Greg, it sounds like you don't want to do this." And I was like, "No, but I really do." It was one of those things that I learned quickly that it's like it's not unlike scripture, right? Your actions actually prove what's going on inside of your heart. It's by your works, right? That you'll be known. And what I was showing people was that I was not called, even though my heart was like full of like this, call to service and like all of this stuff. And it was because I don't know. It was because of this idea of maybe actually going all the way back to the first conversation that we had. This idea that, well, surely not me because I'm not good enough. I'm like this broken thing. I blah blah blah, and that kind of creates the sort of self sabotage going down the road. But also, there's a lot of pride built up in it. And some of these things we are imperfect messengers. That's one of the things that I lean on constantly when I talk about ministry, and especially this time period of ministry, is that there is nothing that I can do that is like the perfect Christian version. I'm sorry. Even this podcast is like such an anathema to the rest of the really well produced podcasts of the Episcopal Church that are so brilliant and so well thought out. And here I get on with my friends and say like dumb things constantly. But it's just what it is, right? And and this is where I'll bring it around full circle. Yes, Fred Durst made break stuff. Yes, Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit were one of the really problematic aspects of like Woodstock 99 and, that whole sort of new metal era of like violent, aggressive, young men, just sort of burning down the world like at the turn of the millennium and stuff like that. But Fred Durst was in a movie last year, which was one of my favorite movies of the year called I Saw the TV Glow. And it was directed by trans woman Jane Schunbrun. And when they made their movie, it was basically using the tropes of like a Buffy style CW show to talk about what it meant to come out as a trans youth in like the 90s and 2000s. And Fred Durst is in this movie and plays a character as like a disapproving father character. And what it reminded me is that we are not always defined by our break stuff era. Like everyone has the opportunity for growth and to come out on the other side. And that image that you have of Fred Durst from back then, it's actually not who Fred Durst is now. Yeah. And so even though I have to claim break stuff as my 2000s song, I do it gratefully knowing that I'm not a break stuff person anymore. So, yeah.
That's right. Well, and I think both in the circumstance that you're describing and also Fred Durst's, not a break stuff person anymore, a more complicated person than the surface level and the break stuff era, right? Do we make space for people in their early 20s to break stuff when they need to break stuff? I don't know. I know that I don't see a lot of people in their early 20s and now 30s in churches, and it's a big problem. And I think a lot of it has to do with not creating space for trying to figure out who you are, breaking stuff, asking hard questions, pissing people off. I don't think we've made that space. And shocker, we don't see them anymore. Well, my pick for the aughts, I really had to look for this, but where I landed was in the middle of the decade with a lingering 90s favorite band, because why not? I'm going with Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day from their rock opera about Jesus of Suburbia, American Idiot.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me and I walk alone.
It's not the title and the title line of the song that I think really speaks to me. I don't necessarily know that I had any broken dreams from that decade, but what the song is about, as I listen to it, is about feeling pretty alone and isolated, even in the middle of a crowd, even in the middle of the city, while everyone else is kind of settled and doing their thing. It's a restless night, walking alone in the dark while everyone else is asleep, and wrestling with those things. And when I was born in 79, so my decades, pretty well map onto the decades themselves. This was the time where I had gotten married, right at the beginning of the decade, out of college. I'd gone to seminary and lived through that, and then was in my first call for 3 years, a little bit less, and then was on to kind of my solo gig after being an associate. And in all of those different eras, I think that I felt sort of profoundly alone in a crowd. I'd gotten married and we'd gone to seminary, but we were living off campus because they didn't have housing that would allow us to have, the dog. And so we were kind of removed from that community. And I made friends, but I didn't feel super connected to the campus life. And we had moved from, Greensboro, where I'd pretty much grown up, to Atlanta, big city, and we knew no one, and just kind of trying to start over in that and feel connected. It was a lonely experience. Trying to figure out ministry in a first call, it's a very lonely experience, though I think we made some really good connections. But really, the kicker is that solo gig in a semi-rural place 6 miles out of a small town in North Carolina. And the people there were great, and I wouldn't say a disparaging thing about them really, but I felt like I was out on an island alone. And I think
Mm.
that's the experience of a lot of our colleagues, particularly those who dare to take that smaller solo gig rather than the multi-staff thing.
Hmm.
And just this idea of reflecting on what it's like to be, kind of out there, always surrounded by people, and
Hmm.
yet feeling like nobody gets it. Nobody's really right there with me. I'm trying to figure out how to lead, talking about that pastoral vocation. And yet I feel like I'm just kind of sitting out on this space on my own. I think also there's a thread in that song about imposter syndrome. And my goodness, is that a common experience for those who do this work, feeling like I am inadequate, I don't have the skills or the wherewithal or the fortitude to do it. Sometimes I really didn't,
Hmm.
and not necessarily feeling supported in that. So um, I, I think that makes it sound like my whole decade was depressing as hell, which it wasn't, but it's a thread that runs through all of it. And
Yeah, no, it's all about it. It's all about experience, and I
yeah,
think that's the thing, right? Is like some of these lessons that make you a good minister, you're never going to learn in a classroom. You're only
yeah,
going to learn in the parish. And the other thing is that those lessons are constantly occurring. So it's like
hmm,
you're 20 years in and you have like something that you're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I never knew that before." When it comes to this
yeah,
work. So, no, I totally agree with you. I love what you said about like the scattering. I think about this with seminary. So you were in seminary in the early 2000s. I was in
hmm,
seminary in the late 2000s. But we both sort of came up at a time when seminaries were still communities. Now I think a
hmm,
lot of the seminary formation experience is like a hybrid experience of like
yeah,
working with online classes and stuff like that. Seminaries, my seminary especially, I know is in trouble of going away. I think a lot of
hmm,
seminaries are
very good.
facing that, that unfortunate reality. But there's something about the intensity of being in that community with other people, and you form like it's almost like it's so intense that you just relationships in a way that you're able to like complete each other's sentences. Like you're so tight. And when you graduate from there, you are scattered. When I say like scattered, I mean like you are seeds just like thrown like from the sower, like all over the country. And frequently I think to myself, boy, if I could just get this person back over here and this person back over here into the same place at the same time, there is absolutely nothing that like we couldn't do. It's one of the reasons why this podcast exists,
I was
quite
going to say,
honestly, right?
I
Because
thought you
like,
were talking about the birth of popping collars directly.
well, I mean, that's a little bit of it. It's like me checking in with my friends and saying, wait, is this your experience too? Like, is this normal? Because I'm not sure if it's normal. But also just maintaining those relationships because you know that like your strength is in this concentration versus like when you get scattered, you're like, well, I know that person, but God, they're in Seattle. And I know that person, but man, they're up in Massachusetts, you know? And it's like, it's great to have those connections, but there's something that feels more powerful about being together than being scattered. Okay, 2010s. We're
2010?
moving through here. We're almost there. So my 2010s song, I have to start by with a preface by saying this song is about the lived experience of black men. It is
Mm.
very contextual. There's a reason why it is a Black Lives Matter anthem. It has nothing to do with my experience, and me claiming it as a song is it's a bit of a reach on my part, honestly, because it does not speak to my experience. But there are lyrics in the song that I think sustained the way that I thought about my years of doing education ministry in the 2010s, and that's "All Right" by Kendrick Lamar.
All's my life I has to fight. All's my life I hard times like yeah, bad trips like yeah. Nazareth, I'm f***ed up, homie, you f***ed up, but if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
Again, Kendrick is singing about a very specific experience, and it is not my experience, and you should listen to this song with that in mind. However, when someone says, all's my life I had to fight, hard times like yeah, bad trips like yeah, I'm effed up, homie, you're effed up, homie, but if God's got us, then we're gonna be all right. That is all I've said to generations of kids for a dozen years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know, like that is a summation of all of our life lessons that we've done with our youth in any capacity that I've worked with them at any stop that I've had along the way from St. Louis to Palm Beach, you know, like it is basically saying if you look out for this person and if they look out for you and if you trust each other, you're going to be okay, right? And the bonds that we form in this institution through what we believe are going to sustain you if you just rely on them, if you just trust that they're going to be there moving forward in life. There are a couple of lessons that I always fall back on. Actually, I can give three right now. One, the world is full of jerks. Don't be one of them.
Mhm.
Just don't be a jerk. You'll be amazed at how many doors that opens for you in life. Two, learn life skills. The Jesus stuff will take care of itself. learn learn life skills. And then three is what we always go over with them when we do our pilgrimage educations and the pilgrimage trips that we do with the youth. Your only job is to just put one foot in front of the other. That's it. That's all you've got to do. I'm not asking anything else of you. I'm only asking that you put one foot in front of the other. And what you'll find is that when you hit those hard times in life, if you just keep moving and you don't stop, you'll find your way out of it, right? If you lean on the person beside you, walking beside you, they're going to help you make it. Like all of these are the lessons that we've been going. And All Right by Kendrick and perfectly encapsulates that. So that's my pick.
And hey, for what it's worth, I think part of the gig is helping people understand its place contextually and then riffing on it anyway. I just think you're doing the work, right? So I appreciate you framing it. But yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I think I don't know what again, maybe tangential bit. Like I think in more recent years, including the 2010s, I do think it's harder. Not because the circumstances are harder, but I think that the grounding that young people have just
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really feel settled in a way that I think ours was. Maybe that's just generational stuff,
Yeah.
but as as important as it is, for us, I think it's a greater challenge,
Mm.
and I'm just going to take that segue, thinking about putting one foot in front of the other, because my pick for this decade, well, it has a lot to do with the fact that I drank the Kool-Aid in the middle of the decade about like banjo, folk, rock, Americana.
Okay.
I'm going Mumford and Sons here.
Mhm.
Lesser known track, but if you followed that moment in music, you probably know it, which is Below My Feet.
Will keep the earth below my feet. For all my sweat, my blood runs weak. And let
Keep the earth below my feet, right? Ties perfectly into what you're talking about. For my own kind of spiritual autobiography, this was the decade where a number of things happened for me that were transformative. And the first one, and not to get way too heavy, but somewhere early on in that decade, I had a member of my congregation kidnapped and murdered, an older
Mm.
man. And it was incredibly traumatic for that family, incredibly traumatic for my congregation, and incredibly traumatic for me as a pastor. And I mean, it broke me.
Mhm.
And that, well, there's no way to say anything about that that's good. We all experience trauma. This was particular trauma, and it was particularly bad. Um, I, it was an opportunity for me to find a catalyst for some transformation.
Mhm.
And a lot of things in my own ministry and my own life, more importantly, I think really are rooted in the change that happened for me because of that brokenness. I mean, and it's things that are both obvious and sort of amazing. Um, Put me in therapy. I need to be in
Mhm.
therapy a long time ago.
Mhm.
And it's it sucks that it took that to put me in therapy. But, you know, the task of ministry is an overwhelming one.
Mhm.
Everybody's task is actually overwhelming. Finding people to help work through that is one of the most important tasks of our lives. And I
Mhm.
wish I had known that before. 18 months after that trauma, we had our first child. And I think that there's a lot to say about that. Somewhere in the soup was, kind of trying to make sense of life and what it's about and experiencing some kind of rebirth and, in renewal and newness in the midst of that level of pain. And then I found myself a few years later in a doctoral program. I put that off for a little bit to be a dad, figure out the whole toddler thing. But that experience in the doctoral program was something that even my MDiv was not. I thought what I was going to do was do that program and then maybe start shopping for another place to land.
Mhm.
I came back from the first seminar ready to make change in my life,
Mhm.
and it was incredibly empowering. And all that ties back to this song, which is about having gone through a time where you feel completely lost and broken, and now I sleep the hours that I can't weep. Man, that just, yeah, that speaks to some of that experience for me. And then to really figure out what it's like to get the earth underneath your feet, to be able to do the walking in the midst of that trauma and to learn from where I've been. That for me, I think is a tremendous turning point for my adult life and my ministry. It is actually feeling like through all of that, I can get the earth below my feet. And, the last of that hook is, keep my eyes to serve and my hands to learn, which is this beautiful reversal of, what you would think the line would be. And, to really pay attention to the opportunities where, I'm called to plug in and what I'm called to do and to learned by getting my hands, dirty. I just love that. So that's my pick for that. And sorry to get a little too, overly autobiographical for that
No,
one.
that's the point
But
of the
but
exercise.
well, yeah, but this one seemed to fit really well for me. So I looked hard for a song that was going to do all of that, and this one really did it. So
Okay, 2020s. We're gonna wrap it up, and I got to tell you, this here podcast has really taken on a specific identity over the last 5 years, which is we have become something of a John Prine museum.
yeah, it's fair.
I honestly, I really do think that losing John Prine early on in COVID has somehow marked the four hosts of this podcast, right? Like all of us at some point had some kind of relationship to John Prine and his music, and so it's really bizarre to me how he ends up on so many of our lists. But I've got John Prine's final song that he did before he died. I remember everything.
I've been down this road before. I remember every tree, every single blade of grass holds a special place for me. And I remember every town and every hotel room and every song I ever sang on a guitar out of tune.
Because what I'm finding is that in this season of my life, so much of what it is that I do and what it is that I think about. And this is, I'm sure this is true of everyone who's in midlife, regardless of if they are in any vocation, whether it's spiritual vocation or teaching vocation in the way that I am. You start to accumulate so much memory and so much experience that you start to try to make like a Frankenstein monster object out of it, where you're like, okay, well, I've got a little bit of this from when I was a kid and a little bit of this from when I was a teenager. It's exactly what we're doing on this pod, right? Like we are constructing our own Frankenstein monsters right now. But I find that happens a lot just in life, where you're just kind of like, you are doing this work of remembering and like really literally doing that, right? Like taking the various member objects of a body or a life lived or whatever, and trying to remember it, piece it back together, right? Like a jigsaw puzzle in your mind. And what I've found is that, boy, that's a trap, because what it means is that you're relying on your brain that has lived a life in a very specific way and has put emphasis on different things, as a result has probably outsized some things and undervalued other things. And so your mind, in this sort of piecing back together, is actually making something that's not real. It's making a monster. That doesn't mean that the monster is bad. Just like if you go back and watch Frank Whale's Frankenstein, it's not a bad thing. It's just, it's not a real thing. I think that I Remember Everything is a very poignant song because I actually don't remember everything. I remember what I want to remember, and I craft it how I want to craft it in my mind. But I think it's impossible to live to midlife and not look back. I think that if, folks that are like, man, I've got no regrets. I don't, I just live my life day to day. While I think that that's commendable in some ways, I think that it's also just a really unfortunate way of going through life if you're not taking stock of the road behind you. I've frequently said, and this relates to my 2020s as well, when I did the Camino de Santiago in 2022, when I was actually out on the path and walking from Saint Jean to Santiago de Compostela, when you're doing that path, you're walking from east to west, right? So when you leave early in the morning, the sun is rising behind you. The sun is at your back. And told people all the time that what I never really appreciated until I got out there is that all of the pictures that I have from that trip, the really good ones are me looking back on
Hmm.
the trail that I've walked.
Yeah.
Those are the really pretty ones because that's where the sun is coming up
Kidding.
behind me, and like the clouds are making these gorgeous, portraits behind me, and the way that the light is coming off of mountains and off of clouds and stuff. It's gorgeous, but I can't go back because that's not where Santiago is. Santiago's the way away from the beauty, right? And I think that that's a bit of what we do when we remember things is that we look back and it looks so beautiful, but that's not where our life is. Our life is actually in the other direction for us to keep walking. And so, anyway, just the way that John Prine's song sort of encapsulates that with I Remember Everything and recognizing that this is an end of life song for him, not a midlife song. I just think it's a really beautiful sort of encapsulation of where I find myself right now. So that's my last pick.
Well, and it occurs to me, and I love the looking back. It occurs to me that not only can you not walk the path back, but the further you go on the path, the more you're able to turn around and it change, right? If you walk back, you're taking pictures of the same stuff that you saw before, right?
Mhm.
The further you go forward, the more beauty there is behind you. I think that's really profound. And for me, I think it really speaks to my experience of what it's like to be at midlife in my 40s, early midlife, right? Still a long way to go, I hope.
Mhm.
But it is the turning around and looking back. For me, the a couple of things about life in my 40s. One is for the first time in my life, I, I do feel like I've got the ground below my feet. I do feel settled. I think I've actually got a pretty good handle on things. I'm not entirely unhappy with where I'm sitting in my life. But here's the problem with that I'm discovering, and it's the story of the bat calf. It's that when you have things about your life that you really love, what's going to happen is you're going to start to lose them.
Mhm.
And the other piece of preface for my pick is my musical interests right now are all completely defined by my 11-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
And I feel like in some ways I have come full circle. Being a kid in the 80s, forced to listen to the station wagon pop. Well, now I'm having to listen to the crossover SUV pop, and you know what I want to do is I want to educate my daughter about the 80s and the 90s and the 10s, and if I had time, the aughts. And no, we're listening to the music that's speaking to her. And actually, it's sort of great. Don't let me pretend it's anything other than great. So in one of life's great joys for me is seeing her enjoy music and
Yeah.
seeing music mean something to her. So this is a genre that I'm listening to right now. So I'm picking a song from it. And the song I'm picking is Benson Boone's "Beautiful Things."
Please stay. I want you, I need you, oh God. Don't take these beautiful things that I've got. Please.
Realizing that you have, so many things in life that you've longed for, and all of a sudden now you're not losing sleep because you haven't made it. You're losing sleep because you're worried about those things ending, going away. And so the song is a prayer. It literally a prayer. Please God, don't take these beautiful things that I've got.
Mhm.
And it's also true that a lot of my 40s, and I'm halfway through them, a lot of my 40s have been about losing things. In the last 4 years, I lost my grandmother, I lost my dad,
Hmm.
Michelle, my wife, lost her dad and then her mom, and COVID was incredible loss. I'm experiencing incredible loss in the church and seeing, the big capital C churches decline and seeing how that
Hmm.
plays out in my own context. And I'm watching, civic institutions fall apart. And that feels like it's just a part of the story of the loss. And like, so this prayer is resonating with me, even though, maybe this is, of all of the songs I've picked, not going to be the top of my favorites list necessarily. Like, it's really nailing it. Please don't take away these beautiful things that I think, I can treasure in my life, whether that be, a stable, nation and economy to live in, or, people that mean a lot to me,
Hmm.
and people that mean everything to me. And, so I'm left wrestling with that. And I think I really get that prayer, that's something.
Yeah, it's this real pivot point, right, of
Mhm.
life where you're at the early stages of loss and, losing friends, relatives, people that you knew from your life leading up to this point,
Mhm.
and yet through children or new family relationships that come in, say, folks that get married or who have a new niece or a new nephew or something like that, like
Yeah.
new aspects are starting to come into your life as well. And there, that midlife point is that real crux point where it's like, there's loss involved and there's still newness involved. It's not
Mhm.
all lost at
Oh,
that point,
right.
which I think is ultimately what really is the heartbreaking stuff of very old age, is that it's easy to sort of get into the cycle of I am just constantly losing at this point, and it's this acceptance thing that we get from something like George Harrison's All Things Must Pass, but
Mhm.
it's also an acceptance thing like we get with George Harrison's Here Comes the Sun, right?
Mhm.
It's like there's this letting go of life and there's this amazing newness of life at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And to back to your metaphor of the pilgrimage and the walk and the turning around and looking, like there are still beautiful things on the horizon that are, the light is such that they're not fully formed. You don't
Right.
see all the good things that sit in front of you in the way that you're able to see all the things that sit behind you, which I think is a really interesting point for the church. I'm probably just gonna have to steal this and preach it, because I think I think that the stuff that's behind us is more attractive, and
Mm-hmm.
we keep wanting to turn around and go back to it
Hmm.
because we can see the beauty of it, the beauty that may be sitting in front of us that's yet to be fully formed or emerge in our sight is just scary, and you wonder, is it going to be what it was? And oftentimes it's a lot better. There's something of life, there's something of the church, I think, in both of those things.
Kyle, thank you so much for your
You're
spiritual
welcome.
autobiography. This is great.
Yeah, I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. So, because we didn't do a full intro at the top, why don't you give me your bona fides? What are you doing right now? Where do you serve? What are you up to?
So right now, I have just finished my 8th year at or Alamance Presbyterian Church, which is in the southeast part of Guilford County, which is in the middle part of North Carolina, Greensboro, High Point, the Triad area. And we've got a lot of things in the cooker there. We are kind of at that threshold, that pivot point of wrestling with some loss of some things that are behind us and looking forward to some new opportunities. So that's really kind of what's setting in front of us, is imagining the kind of church that we're going to want to be. And otherwise, as I mentioned already, the parent of an 11-year-old, she is going to her promotion ceremony this Friday to become a middle schooler. So soon I will be a middle school dad, and that is occupying a lot of my bandwidth at present.
Kyle, thank you so much for joining me on the PC Music Diary. That is it. Our picks are in the books. We will have them up as a Spotify playlist. We'll have a link in the show notes for this show. Kyle, thank you for joining us. We will see you guys next time.
Stay. I want you, I need you, oh God. I need these beautiful things that I've got.